Good evening and welcome to the Goethe-Institut Chicago. Now the Goethe-Institut is the
Yeah.
right?
If we have to use it, I'm
You
fine.
don't?
If you don't think we need to use it, then
I do the try. I do the tryout and you do the perform.
you can test it with.
Okay. So welcome to the Goethe-Institut Chicago. This is the Federal Cultural Institute of the Republic of Germany, for those who have not heard about the Goethe-Institut. I'm very happy to announce this wonderful evening with experts here from Munich and Chicago tonight to discuss contemporary German theater, to talk about dramaturgy and the dramaturg, and to learn about our different perspectives in the context of playwriting, dramaturgy, and texts. This event will also showcase readings from contemporary playwrights, presented by three actors. I'm sorry, I don't know your names, but you are three actors from the Goodman Theater. I hope, yeah?
Oh, we just grabbed me off the street. Hopefully we'll figure it out together.
Okay, we can judge later. After the so our guest from Munich is Sebastian here in the middle. He's chief dramaturg and deputy artistic director of the Bavarian State Theater, also known as Residenztheater, since 2011. The Residenztheater has three different venues. The main house at Max-Josef-Platz with 877 seats, the Cuvillier Theater with 523 seats, and the so-called Marstall, which has maximal 160 seats. At the moment, 50 actors and actresses are employed, and the staff is around 450 people of staff at the theater. Sebastian Buber received his MA in German Studies and Theater Studies. He has worked in Graz, at the Thalia Theater in Hamburg, at the State Theater in Stuttgart, and between 2002 and 2009, he worked at the Burgtheater in Vienna. And he has also been a dramaturgical advisor at the Salzburger Festspiele. Welcome to Chicago. Our guest from Chicago is Robert Falls, the artistic director of the Goodman Theater here. This theater was founded in 1922 and opened in 1925, and is the oldest and largest non-for-profit theater in Chicago. The Goodman Theater has two theaters, is that right?
Yes.
Under one roof.
Yes.
Yes. You have about like 250 artists on a hired on a contract basis.
On a seasonal basis.
On a seasonal
we
basis.
unlike Sebastian's theater, do not have a resident company of actors. So actors come in for individual productions on a yearly basis.
And this is around 250 artists
Probably.
per year, and you staff around 200 employees. Robert Falls has been the artistic director of the Goodman Theater since 1986. Two of Mr. Falls' most acclaimed Brooklyn productions, Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman and Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, both first staged at the Goodman Theater, were honored with 7 Tony Awards and 3 Drama Desk Awards. Falls has received an Obie Award and a Helen Hayes Award and multiple Jeff Awards. This evening was initiated and will be moderating by Amy Stebbins. Amy Stebbins received her MA in Germanic Studies at the University of Chicago and is currently a PhD candidate there. In 2015, Stebbins received the German Chancellor Fellowship given by the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung. With this fellowship, Stebbins became a scholar in residence at the dramaturgy department at the Residenztheater. Here the circle. Stebbins describes her fellowship project as follows: new play development in Germany and the USA, seeking to connect and initiate dialogue between US American and German theater artists and administrators. So this evening is part of that project and is funded by the German Chancellor Fellowship of the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung. The language plays were also curated and translated by Amy.
Only
Stebbins.
the Jelinek, not the
Only the
Niederfrau.
Jelinek.
Niederfrau was done by their company.
But they were both curated. You have chosen the place. I thank all of you for coming to the Goethe-Institut tonight, and I will now pass on the word to
Thank you, Petra, and thank you all very much for coming. It's so exciting. No applause yet. Very exciting to see how much interest there is in contemporary German theater here in Chicago. I have to say, you know, hearing about, I guess I have a sort of I don't think I've ever told you this, Bob. That is a small secret. That when I was a little girl growing up in New Hampshire, my mother and I went on a pilgrimage to Boston to see Death of a Salesman, which was touring through, and that was one of the really formative moments of my, you know, falling in love with theater as a kid. So, thank you for that, Bob. And it's very, very exciting to have you here tonight. So I had this fellowship, and I want to say this brief because I know you're all here to hear what these two gentlemen have to say about what's going on at their theaters. But when I began this project, I had the Residenztheater interested in me coming out there to sort of talk about nuclear development in the U.S. and to see how they were making work there. And I didn't really know very many people working in theater in Chicago, so I sent out some emails to, you know, a couple of theaters, and then I thought, well, let me just send Robert Falls an email and see what happens. He was the only one who wrote back. And he wrote back with a great enthusiasm, and then we met and we had a 2.5-hour conversation, and I had nothing to teach him or to tell him, but he was really intrigued. And so we extended that, and we brought Bob out to Munich at this time last year to sort of introduce him to the Residenztheater, to introduce him to Sebastian, and to show him, at the time there were 3 contemporary American plays happening on the stages in Munich, so he got to see those in addition to some other productions. So now we're coming full circle, and Sebastian is here and seeing the work at the Goodman, and hopefully we can share some of the observations that we've made about their work with you tonight. I guess I'd like to begin with a clarifying point, which is something that we always come back to, which is this role of the dramaturg. I'm sure that this isn't something that we can answer quickly, but perhaps rather than asking the question, what is a dramaturg, you could explain what you do as a dramaturg. What is your job precisely in this theater?
Yeah, I can try. Good evening. I'm really very happy to be here, and I spent 3 very, very interesting and impressive days here with a lot of very good and interesting meetings. And I came here to learn and to see how things are developed around here. And that's because we find that we are concerning contemporary dramatic production. The American production is very interesting to us, and we produce many of these plays, and we will keep on doing so. We'll have 3 new plays on next year. I'm working in a theater where we have around 20 new productions each year in these 3 venues that I told you about. So that means we are a board of 5 dramaturgs, and the task is, let's say, divided in 3 parts. One is the programming. So the program of next season is always a task that keeps us up all year, and as the and even we're even more and more becoming a sort of an opera system. So there are a few directors that you have to talk 2 or 3 years in advance to sort of, because they're booked so well. That's one thing. The second thing, obviously, is the classical production dramaturgy that is working with a director on a cast, with the director and the cast on the production, and this work is very diverse. That's very different from each production to the other, not only depending on how you work together with a director, but also do you have a text? Is it a new text or an old text? Do you devise a text, or do you sort of don't start off with a text at all, which is not a rare thing to do, so that's very different in the different productions. And then the third is obviously the work with the audiences and with schools and all different sorts of circles and yeah.
So to the second point, the kind of work that you do in the rehearsal room, I mean, you have a classical text, let's say something like Hamlet. What then is your function? I mean, are you, let's say that a director comes, one expects with a particular vision of how he or she wants to direct it. Where does your role come in? Are you sort of administrating for the house to make sure that the production is in line with the expectations of the institution, or is there kind of a more creative role that you're taking on?
Yeah, the work is in the beginning mainly conceptual. You're reading the play together with the director, and you, in most cases, you sort of work on a vision that might come from a certain impulse from the director, but it is developed very much in collaboration and in dialogue. Because in complex cases like Hamlet, the first impulse is extremely important, but it can never sort of work for the whole play, because nothing in Hamlet works for the whole play. But to sort of try to follow first ideas and to see how far you will get with them and how this influences the draft and the cast and all these kind of questions. That's very important work to be done at an early stage, and sometimes you introduce new texts to sort of strengthen your interpretation or your idea or vision of the text or the production, and these are things that are done in close collaboration most of the time. And then once rehearsals start, you are sort of the first audience with all the information you have, and you try to sort of sit back and try to sort of see what is working how and what doesn't. And the most interesting part is the way things change during rehearsals, because it'll never come out as you thought. And I think that's even more interesting than the table work before the production. The influence the actors have on a production, the actors' questions have, the actors' character and way of playing or seeing their parts, and the process in rehearsals. That is the most fascinating and interesting part of our work.
I'm curious, do you, in the early stages I would assume sometimes you and the theater might approach a certain director to say, would you be interested in doing a new production of Hamlet for us? And at other times, a director may come to you and say, I would like to do a new production of Hamlet. I assume correctly, or is it more often that you are going to a particular director, or are they coming to you occasionally?
Very rarely. We pick directors that we want to work with, and then it might come out that that one of them wants to, or all of them want to do Hamlet, and we only. So the way you sort of agree on a production with a director, that's sometimes a very long process. But the way we pick directors is that we come to them. Sometimes I get letters, but honestly I don't react.
It's the same. Yes. Well, we're the same way. I have to say. I mean, we receive, letters or requests for conversations about directing at the Goodman Theater, which generally does not lead anywhere, particularly if we do not know their work.
Exactly.
But it is interesting in the case, and I would think that what we have, particularly in terms of, let's say, a classic text, let's stay with Hamlet, that there are directors whom we admire, many of whom we've worked with before, but others whose work, like I said, we admire, or we've seen, or we've been excited by, and we will sit with them and say, what productions would you like to do at the Goodman? Do you have, are there 3 Shakespeares you would be interested in doing? Is there, or what is it that most excites you? Is it a play by Moliere? Is it an Ibsen play? Is it a play by Arthur Miller or Tennessee Williams? And that will often lead into conversation. I would say more often than not, for us with a classical text, it is not us saying, who can we find to direct King Lear? It comes out of the director's instinct and passion to direct King Lear. A little bit,
Yeah, it is a thing that it is always a dialogue. It's always, but we try to play a very active role in that because we try to sort of get a program for at least a season or for parts of a season that makes sense between. Intertextual sense between the productions, and we try to sort of invent topics or issues or categories for us to work with, or hypotheses. So we say for this the Shakespeare of this season would be best if it would be Macbeth. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about this? The next year it would be Richard III. Can we talk about this? And obviously, sometimes you are talking to a director about Shakespeare, and he says, "Yeah, everything, but Richard III will not do this," and for good reasons.
But may I ask, are you, with your colleagues, with the dramaturgs, and with the director of the company, often you will create. I'm saying create on paper, but you know what I mean. Now, what I also want to say that when Sebastian talks about, and I saw my actors get excited over there, 20 new productions a year. That's 20 new productions a year, in addition to another 20 that are in the repertory. So as an actor, for example, you would be in rehearsal during the course of a week, let's say, to revive a production that you have done of Macbeth that's coming back for 2 performances, while you're working on a new production, let's say of Enemy of the People by Ibsen. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Along with a new play, let's say by a new play by a German writer. So it's such a different, interesting system that I think for our audiences to understand that it's 20 new productions. So I would assume that what I would say, and we try to do the same thing, although it sounds a little more haphazard in our situation. It just does. And it may be for you too, because things fall out or a director can't make a production. That you are perhaps designing a season that has a dialogue within itself,
Yes.
And the community of plays that you think would have a dialogue throughout the course of the year, particularly in. So you have obviously part of the work is to say which productions do we want to bring back for whatever reasons, but at the same time in the selection of the new productions, there's a larger concept
Yeah.
to that coming from the dramaturgs and the director.
Yeah. That's completely right. You're even right in calling it creative on paper, because we sort of design a program that makes sense in itself, but as we were playing repertory all the time, it sort of gets mixed with the productions of last year all the time.
Yeah.
So it's not as explicit as it may sound now, but still, it's a good way. It's a good means of communicating with your audiences if you can say, look, we chose this and this and this because we think you might not have thought of Robbers by Schiller and Antigone by Sophocles being in some sort of context, but we can do that by implementing a new play which sort of shows you the connection, and by some discussions and panels around it, so we can sort of get a sense of contextualization. And that's really important to us, and that's why we try to sort of talk actively to the directors.
Do you ever think, wow, we've just done 4 really heavy plays and now we need a comedy? Our audience has just gone through 4 absolutely miserable experiences of 5 hours of German and American and English angst.
Yeah,
Sturm and Drang.
No, we only and think how can we get darker?
And how you do? You say how can we go darker? There's a wonderful, Leonard Cohen's last album, right before he died was, what is it? How dark can you? It seriously is like, how dark can you get?
Want it darker.
Oh, you want it darker. It's his last record, right? You want it darker. So there you go.
Yeah. Of course, we're trying to sort of to present a sort of mixture that
I bet it occurs to you.
But we do not always succeed.
Well, nor do we.
No, we're not a theater that is particularly known for a great amount of comedy.
Yeah. Neither is the Goodman. You happen to be here. I mean, Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, which is actually one of the few plays he does not call a comedy.
Yeah.
It's called Scenes from Country. This is the most recent production I did. It is called Scenes from Country Life. But the other 3 of his plays are actually called comedies. It happens to have comic elements, but it is interesting that the 3 plays that you have seen here are essentially comic works, which is not always the case.
We're going to have to cut soon to one of the readings. However, there's one question that I wanted to get in before we do that, which is on the subject of new works, and specifically of the works of your dramaturgs at the Goodman, because they're occupied certainly with the same tasks, but then it seems to me from our conversations that the emphasis is in a different place, largely on new works.
Well, that was, I think, the subject that I spoke of when I met Sebastian. And I loved how interested he was in this subject matter, because it's a very, very different system, clearly. And one of the things that I think leads American theaters is the production of new plays. We do a great number of classic works or revivals of relatively recent productions, but the majority of our works is developing and creating new plays for the first time. It probably occupies, oh gosh, I'm looking at my literary director over there and my dramaturg. What percentage of new work do we currently do to classic work?
Like 2/3.
About 2/3? Well, it's just an ongoing process that never stops. That we have an entire office devoted to new play development, which is rather different. That clearly, and this is a discussion, I know you have to get on, so I'm not. The thing that fascinates me, of course, is that Germany has historically been
I mean, of course, some of the greatest playwrights, poets of all time, but current German theater practice seems to me, as a great admirer, director-driven. It is generally a director-driven theater, in my opinion. Whereas most of American theater, what makes American theater go is new work, playwrights. That the playwrights have as much power as the director, for example, which we talked a lot about in Munich.
Yeah.
That the original productions of new plays, and seriously, most of the time, if we develop a new play, or we found a new play, or we're working with a new play, it's the author of the new play who says, I want to work with this director on my play, as opposed to the other way, which would never happen, would it?
No, never.
I'll turn it back to you. We can come back to this subject.
Yeah, I think this is going to go on through the rest of the evening. But there is indeed some playwriting happening in Germany right now.
Good segue.
Thanks, Bob. And the first text that we're going to hear tonight is from a play by a Swiss author named Milo Rau, who has become very in demand in the German-speaking world and in the French-speaking world, and very much throughout Europe, actually. He is trained as a sociologist. He worked with Pierre Bourdieu. I'm not sure if he has a PhD, but he is certainly trained in sort of more analytical theory, and he now has a collective with whom he works, and actually Sebastian has worked with them because they worked with Residenztheater. The piece that we're going to hear now is from the first part of a trilogy that he wrote.